Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a long post about how I found out my wife was cheating with my boss. My world came crashing down. I couldn't let it go, so I decided to have an affair with her mother just to make myself feel better. I'm 24, and my wife, Joyce, is 23. We've been married for 2 years. We'd been living together, so the switch from living into getting married wasn't a big deal. However, we had different career paths, which led to a few ups and downs. We were college sweethearts and married right after graduating. Looking back, I think that was a mistake. I should have waited to settle down until I'd experienced a few heartbreaks. I wish I could turn back time and take that advice. We married at 22, which I know is too young and naive. She was the only girlfriend I'd ever had. She was popular in college and already dating someone else when we met. We started working together on a project, and that's how despite her popularity and existing relationship, we started a conversation. As we worked on the project, we formed a deep connection. Over time, we realized that our bond was something special and decided to take a chance on each other. Her overprotective boyfriend would always show up when we had to work together, which led to their breakup. I gained a little confidence and asked her out one day. She agreed for just one date so as not to ruin our friendship. I took her out to the movies so that I could take advantage of the dark and hold her hand. We had some great times together. She didn't put up a fight when I asked her out, and I knew then that she was the one for me. I tried to charm her into falling in love with me, and eventually she did. We ended up getting married when we were still pretty young. Joyce had been living with her mother during college. Joyce's mom, Evelyn, was a single parent. She was pregnant with Joyce when she was 15 and has been taking care of her ever since. Joyce's dad left when she was born, so Evelyn has been by her side the whole time. She's a stay-at-home mom. At the time, I didn't know much about Joyce's background. Evelyn was a stay-at-home mom, so I had no idea how she would come up with money to put Joyce through college without a decent job. It wasn't my place to judge or ask about it, so I never brought it up in my conversations with Joyce. They were very close to each other and had been each other's support all through the years. I wasn't a big fan of Evelyn, though. I always had this feeling about her, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe our first meeting didn't go well, despite my reservations. I respected the strong bond between Joyce and Evelyn and tried to keep an open mind about their relationship during our dating phase. I was supposed to pick Joyce up for a party I was going to. I went to her house and was seated by Evelyn in the living area. Joyce was in her room getting ready, so I was asked to wait for another 15 minutes until she showed up. Evelyn started talking to me about my likes and dislikes, and so on. I thought it was just a protective mom trying to know the guy her daughter had been dating. As the conversation progressed, I could see Evelyn trying to bridge the gap between us. I was feeling a bit nervous and really comfortable at the same time. It didn't feel right. I started to wonder if Evelyn was trying to make a move on me. The more she tried to connect with me, the more I realized that maybe I had misread the situation entirely. Maybe it was a test that I needed to pass. I had to pass the test so that I could get Evelyn's approval to date her daughter. Those 15 minutes felt like an eternity. When Joyce came down, I was relieved and immediately stood up to leave. Evelyn hugged Joyce and told her something in the ear, which I assumed were the results of my character and loyalty test. I mentally kicked myself for thinking that. I was thinking all kinds of absurd things about my girlfriend's mother and took my leave with a sheepish grin. We both had about 6 months to graduate from college and started living together. It was easier this way, as I was living closer to college. This way, we could save up some money. We both decided that we would get married after graduation, so that we could get started on our life together as a KOA without wasting years waiting for the right moment. Looking back, I feel like I was either hypnotized or trapped by black magic to make that decision. After our graduation, we set up a date and had an intimate wedding with close friends and family. We made a few changes to our existing house to make it a little more functional for a married couple. It was tough to land a job with a decent salary without any experience. It took a while, but I finally found a job that would be something I wanted and was also paying a decent amount. Joyce was in the process of getting a job for herself, but she wanted to get some hands-on experience. She wanted to start her own hairdressing salon, so she needed investors. I started working for a construction company. My job was to go to various construction sites and supervise the safety and progress of the projects. I had to determine if everything was running smoothly and if we would be able to deliver by the deadlines promised to the clients. It was challenging and demanding, but I enjoyed it. It wasn't like a boring desk job, which allowed me to work on my fitness routine due to all the walking at work. After 1 year, I was promoted for my hard work by my boss, Brian. He was always demanding and nagging about some things that he felt could be improved. He was in his late 50s and had taken over the company from his father. I invited Brian for dinner to thank him for the promotion that I received. He was initially hesitant, but after I persisted for a while, he agreed. We agreed to have dinner at our place on Friday. Brian showed up at the house alone and didn't bring his wife. I didn't want Joyce to feel left out and bored during the entire dinner. I was surprised to see a very different side of my boss that day. He was cracking jokes, being accommodating, and not being the usual. He was a different person outside of work, too. He even brought a bottle of wine, which I wasn't expecting. We finished our dinner and went into the backyard, where we set up a drinks table. We finished the bottle of wine that he had brought, so I went inside to get something else to drink, and when I came back, I noticed that my boss and Joyce were deep in conversation. Joyce was telling him about her hairdressing course and her plans to open her own salon once she finds a decent investor. My boss seemed genuinely interested in the conversation, so I thought it would be better not to disturb the flow of the conversation, so I poured the drinks and sat back, trying to be part of it. It looked as if I didn't exist, as they were so engrossed in their conversation. I listened to Joy, who always talked passionately about her dreams. I admired her determination and ambition. It was inspiring to see my boss engaged, offering advice and encouragement. I realized that this conversation was an opportunity for Joyce to showcase her potential. I silently hoped that she would find that investor in my boss. The conversation had shifted from my promotion to, as the night went on, my boss asked Joyce to give a presentation and meet him in his office in a week to talk more about it. He also asked her to pick a few places, think about the cost of equipment, and think about the staff she'd need to get the salon up and running. Joyce was really keen to do it. My boss was happy with the plan and told Joyce to get started on the presentation. He also asked her to gather all the info she needed. As we were leaving, I could feel the excitement building for Joyce and her new business. We were both really excited about how this was going to go. We celebrated the entire night by having a few more drinks and having passionate sex to mark the start of something new. Joyce was busy in the next few weeks working on her presentation. I got back to work at my new position. We were both busy with our hectic work schedules. Joyce presented her proposal to Brian and he agreed to invest in Joyce's hair salon. It opened up in a great spot, but Joyce was busy running it by herself until she could get someone reliable to manage things. I, on the other hand, was getting a lot of projects in different cities, which meant I had to stay away from home more often than not. I could see that Joyce and Brian had become too close for comfort. It didn't look like a normal partnership between an investor and a business owner. I started to notice that my boss had been spending more of his time at Joyce's salon than at his main office, which was something that kept bothering me. I asked Joyce if there was something going on between her and Brian. She said it wasn't true and that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Brian was more interested in finding out when he would start receiving profits on his investment. He was trying to study the market and give her tips on how she could increase sales. I wasn't happy that Joyce was spending so much time with Brian instead of focusing on our relationship. As Joyce's business took off, she got a lot busier, which led to a lot of friction between us. I could see cracks beginning to form in our relationship. We started having a lot of arguments about who was giving how much to the relationship. My boss sent me on a lot of business trips to other locations, which meant I didn't get to spend as much time with Joyce as I would have liked. I could feel the emotional as well as physical distance growing. I noticed that our conversations were getting shorter and less frequent, and it seemed like we were drifting apart. The lack of quality time together was taking a toll on our relationship, leaving me longing for the connection we once had. One day, as I was on one of my business trips, I called Joyce from I went to her hotel room to check on her. I thought of making a video call just to surprise her and also to show her the room I was staying in. It had a wonderful sea view that I wanted to share with her. She rejected 2 of my calls, which was strange because I knew that her salon would be closed today and she would be at home. I managed to get through on the 3rd attempt, but she seemed too distracted to talk. She kept glancing over her shoulder at something that was clearly more interesting than the view I was trying to show her. I have to admit that I was a little irked by her indifference towards my gesture. I noticed something strange in the background that I couldn't quite make out. It didn't belong to our bedroom. It looked like a men's boxer. As far as I knew, I'd stopped wearing boxers since I was a teenager. I was pretty sure it wasn't mine, and I knew Joyce didn't own any boxers. I decided to ask Joyce about the boxer when I got home. I was on a business trip when I noticed Brian's car outside Joyce's salon. I went in and asked the receptionist where I could find Joyce. I knew the answer already, but I wanted to check. As I walked towards Joyce's cabin, I heard the receptionist call her. I thought it was a bit strange that the receptionist was making it sound like I had an appointment with Joyce when I was actually her husband. I just let it go, thinking it was just protocol and that she was doing her job. I knocked on the door and decided to show myself. It was my wife after all. I didn't need permission to get inside my wife's cabin. I noticed that Brian and Joyce were sitting on the sofa with a file that they were going through. I greeted Brian and walked towards Joyce to hug her. When I was hugging her, I could see the file that they were looking at, which was upside down. That's a unique way to go about it. I thought that going through your business is what I was going to do. I sat across from them on the sofa and was expecting Brian to take his leave and give us some privacy. Instead, he asked me to submit a report on my business trip at his desk by tomorrow morning. I was surprised by his demand, but nevertheless I agreed to it. I couldn't deny that he was still my boss and that I'd have to take orders from him. I was waiting for Joyce to wrap up with Brian so we could talk about ourselves. After a few minutes, Joyce and Brian said their goodbyes with a hug. I was surprised by how close they'd become in the last few months. I'd known for months that they were business partners, but I'd never seen them so friendly, hugging each other like that. I saw a different side to both Joyce and Brian, which, to be honest, I wasn't a fan of. I joked with Joyce that she was too friendly to hug anyone and anything. She looked a bit confused and had a blank expression on her face. I decided to let it go for now as I didn't want to start an argument straight away. I asked her if she'd like to leave with me for a bit so that we could spend some quality time together. She was really happy with my suggestion and decided to leave. We went straight to a fancy restaurant for dinner, as we hadn't been able to in a while. We spent a lot of time together and caught up on what was going on with us during the last few days. I brought up the topic of her closeness with Brian. She said that he was actually a very nice person. Once we got outside of work, he had a lot to say. He wanted to share his ideas to help with growing the business they've been working on for a while now. She was expecting to see positive results soon. All this talk was boring me to death. I could see that Joyce didn't actually answer my question. She was just talking whatever came to her mouth. This made me have my own doubts about their relationship. I didn't want to create a scene in a public place. I took whatever answer she threw at me. I never thought about figuring out what was going on. I even started noticing that I was given a lot of projects at work to handle, which were mostly in other cities. There were people who had much more experience than me at handling them, but I couldn't understand why Brian was doing this. Was it so that I could gain more experience, or I was still unsure about their relationship? It seemed like they were keeping me busy at work so that I don't get to spend enough time with Joyce. I knew I had to figure it out on my own. I knew that complaining to my manager about my work would have a negative impact on my professionalism. I had to find another way. The only way out was to mess up enough to get fired off a few projects, which would give me time to find answers to my questions. So that's what I did for the next few days. I messed up big time, so my managers complained to Brian that I was incapable of handling that many projects at the same time. As I didn't have enough experience, he had to reduce the number of projects I was working on. So far, the plan was working. On my way to work the next day, I decided to call my manager and let him know that I had a flat tire, so I would be coming into work a little late. I was proud of myself for thinking of a good excuse. I was getting better at coming up with excuses to keep an eye on Joyce and Brian. I parked my car in the opposite lane of Joyce's salon from where I could see the entrance very clearly. I bought a sandwich on my way and waited in my car for Joyce to show up for work. I had a feeling that she would definitely show up as I waited, having my sandwich. I couldn't imagine how I would be able to get over this situation if there was actually something going on between Joyce and Brian. I waited for more than 30 minutes and was about to give up when I saw Joyce park her car in front of the salon. She unlocked the door and went inside. I just had to wait for Brian to show up, which I was pretty sure would happen. I was still hoping it wouldn't though. A little over 10 minutes passed when Brian started parking his car just he got out of the car and walked into the salon, locking it from inside. I waited for about 5 minutes and then decided to see what was going on. I had a spare key to the salon, which I used to get inside. I had come prepared just in case I had to use it. I knew where to find it. I tiptoed towards Joyce's cabin. I could hear them laughing and talking animatedly. I slowly opened the door just a little bit so that I could take a peek into the room. What I saw was something I was expecting but definitely not ready for. I saw Joyce sitting on the table with her legs spread wide. Brian was standing in the gap between her legs. I already knew what I was going to see, but I wasn't prepared for how badly it would hurt. I decided I needed proof that they were having an affair, so I took out my phone and started filming. It was painful to watch. I had to watch my boss and my love interest being intimate, but I knew I had to do it with a heavy heart. I hit record and made sure I captured most of what I could before it got too much for me to watch. I filmed them kissing, undressing each other, and then Brian going down on his knees. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I was hyperventilating as if I was about to die of a stroke, so I made my way out and started puking. It's never easy to see someone you love cheating on you with someone else and acting as normal as possible with you. I would have given an Oscar to Joyce for acting like the perfect wife when, in reality, all she was doing was sleeping with my boss. I could see our journey so far. I tried to do everything I could to live up to Joyce's expectations as a boyfriend and as a husband. I don't think I did anything that would cause Joyce to cheat. I had always been good to her and tried to support her in every decision she ever made, even though I would not agree with most of her decisions. That's what love means to me, being there for each other, even if it seems like the other person is making a mistake. I knew that this was not something I deserved, and definitely not something I should be okay with. I wasn't okay with it. I sat in my car and went to work because I didn't have the courage to face either Joyce or Brian. I tried to focus on the project I was working on, but it was getting difficult to think straight. I went home feeling dejected and sad. Joyce came home early today and said she wanted to cook dinner for us both. I tried to act normal, as if nothing had happened, and that I was still the loving and caring husband she always wanted. My heart had broken into 1,000 pieces, and I knew it would be very difficult for me to trust and love someone again. I really believed that Joyce was my soulmate and that we'd be living happily together forever. That was a dream that's now come crashing down along with my hopes for a future together. I was filled with anger and didn't know how to let go of all this negativity. I was feeling pretty angry and frustrated. It had been 3 days since I'd seen Joyce cheat, and I still didn't know how to get over it. Just then, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, wondering who it could be. It was still early in the morning on a Sunday when I opened the door and saw Evelyn standing there with 2 big bags of groceries. I motioned for her to get in, as I wasn't in the mood for a chat. I quickly came up with an excuse to avoid engaging with her, and that's when my mind was hit with a bolt of inspiration. I suddenly had a flash of inspiration. I knew exactly what I wanted to do to get my sweet revenge. I always lived by the mantra that you should always give back what you get in return, if possible, double it. It was time for me to live by that mantra. I excused myself from Evelyn and went to my room. I needed some quiet time for myself. To come up with the plan, I could see that Joyce was still sleeping after a very long day at the salon yesterday. I know what kept her busy, obviously, and it wasn't work. I wanted to take advantage of the fact that Evelyn had always wanted to get closer to me. This was the perfect opportunity. I laid out the basics of my plan, or what I thought I could achieve by doing this one thing. I knew I wanted Joyce to feel the same pain I did when I saw her and Brian together. I wanted her to have the same heartbreak I did when she saw me when the evening came. I asked Evelyn to stay with us for a few days. Joyce and Evelyn were surprised at my suggestion, as they thought I was uncomfortable around Evelyn. Evelyn tried to politely refuse my request, but I made sure I looked genuinely interested. I asked her to stay with us for a few days, and it worked. Evelyn agreed to spend a few nights with us. My plan was finally coming together, and all I had to do was try to be as nice to Evelyn as I could so that she thinks it's mutual. Joyce asked me what it was all about. I told Evelyn she could stay with us. I knew she and Joyce have a close relationship, so I didn't want to make things awkward between them because of me. I wanted to be open with Evelyn and give her a chance to reduce the awkwardness between us. Joyce raised an eyebrow at Joyce was happy that I was giving her mother a chance. She didn't have time to deal with me anyway, as she was busy with Brian. She was having an affair and trying her best to hide it from me. It's been 2 days since Evelyn started living with us, and I've tried to be as close to her as possible. I'd accidentally brush hands with her while making breakfast or bump into her while coming out of my room or sit too close to her on the couch while watching TV. I was trying everything I could to test the waters and see if Evelyn was getting my drift. It felt like fishing again, waiting for the fish. My wife's mother, Evelyn, always made passes at me, even when we were dating. I found it odd, but I ignored it because I loved my wife and wanted to be loyal to her. I knew that Joyce trusted only 2 people in her life, and I did not want to break her heart by telling her about her mom's actions. All I had to do was ignore her advances, and things would not blow out of proportion. I figured I could just ignore her and it wouldn't be a big deal. I decided to give it a shot with Evelyn. I knew she'd be into it if she got even a hint that I was interested. She was the kind of person who... Evelyn was so wrapped up in her own world that she never considered that she was trying to seduce her daughter's husband. She had always looked at me with lustful ease and would be happy to know that I think the same about her, so I decided to take my chances with Evelyn and give her the bait. I knew that there was no going back. In hindsight, Evelyn was a great catch. She was just 38 and still looked amazing. At least she was not my mother's age, which made me go ahead with the plan. I know I was being mean, using Evelyn's longing for a partner to my advantage, but I had no other choice. This was the only way. I could make Joyce realize what it felt like to betray the one you truly love. I tried to lure her using my body as well. I came home after a run and took off my shirt, walking towards the fridge to get some water. Evelyn was preparing breakfast and I knew that she was stealing glances at my body. I walked towards her and whispered, "Good morning." I whispered good morning in her ear while taking a coffee mug from the rack above her. Evelyn was eagerly anticipating our encounters and showering me with affection. I nodded at her, and I couldn't help but question my decision to manipulate her emotions for my own agenda. However, desperate times called for desperate measures. I was willing to take desperate measures to teach Joyce a lesson she'd never forget. It was time to take the final step of my plan. I sent an accidental message to Joyce asking her to meet me at home, as she was at her salon and wouldn't be back until later that night. I made sure she read the message. I then deleted it. I sent another message to Joyce, acting all innocent, saying that I'd see her tonight after work. I called in sick at work and told Evelyn that I needed her help with something. I knew that Joyce would check with Brian to see if I'd shown up for work to verify the message I'd sent. I figured out how long it would take Joyce to get home from her salon, and I wanted to be ready for her. I had breakfast with Evelyn to show her that I was interested. I told her she looked sexy, even for her age. I even mentioned that if it wasn't for Joyce, I would have definitely gone for her. This made her blush, and I could see the tension building up. I had to make sure that Evelyn did not take things into her own hands before it was time. I decided to leave her alone and prepare things in my room. I went and tracked Joyce's phone's location to see if she was on her way home. On my way home, I pulled up the sheets and pretended I'd sprained my back. I called out to Evelyn for help. I made sure she believed I was badly injured and needed her help. She tried to make me sit on the bed, and this was my chance to make things steamy. I fell on the bed and made sure that she fell in such a way that she couldn't resist what I did next. Our faces were close, and I could see that Evelyn was ready to take that chance. I let her kiss me because I didn't want to be the first to cheat. I know it was stupid of me to still think of not betraying my wife. Evelyn kissed me. I then started to take it further. It would take another 10 minutes for Joyce to get home, which should give me enough time to do all that I had planned. I made sure that Joyce was unaware of the growing sexual tension between Evelyn and me. All these days, she had no idea who she would be catching. Once Evelyn got home, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. I knew it was time to take it up a notch. I started undressing Evelyn and making her moan with pleasure. I could hear footsteps on the stairs, so I tried to distract Evelyn from it. Joyce caught me with Evelyn in a compromising position. The plan was to get caught in our house and in our very own bed. I wonder how many times Brian and Joyce made love on that same bed when I was away on business. Joyce stood there, a mix of shock and anger evident on her face. I couldn't help but feel a wave of victory wash over me. She screamed as loud as she could, which made Evelyn and I come out of our room. Evelyn started covering herself, and Joyce had a horrified look on her face. She started screaming how we could do something like this to her. We were the only people she had trusted, and we'd let her down. Evelyn was genuinely she was about to say something when I cut her off. I told her that I felt the same way when I saw her and Brian making out in her office. I could see the color drain from her face when she realized I knew about the little affair she was trying to hide. She accused me, saying that I was making made-up stories to cover my own mistakes. I couldn't believe she was denying it until the end. I showed her the video I'd filmed, which finally made her admit to it. She said she didn't mean to cheat on me, but she had to because he was investing in her business. I didn't buy it, given how they interacted. She didn't seem forced at all. She was enjoying his company, going to expensive dinners in the guise of meetings and taking expensive gifts from him. What did she even see in him? My boss was way too old to be a grandfather to our children. How could my wife even think of cheating on me with him? He was loaded, but even so, that doesn't mean you sleep with anyone who's throwing money at you. I was pretty shattered, to say the least. I know what I did doesn't justify my actions against my wife. I'm not going to lie, it did feel good getting back to Joyce for what she did to me in our relationship. I agree with people who say that even a lifetime isn't enough to truly know a person. I can't help but wonder if my financial stability was my wife broke up with her boyfriend and agreed to marry me because she thought she loved me. I know I'll never get answers to these questions in this lifetime. I have to live with the fact that my wife cheated on me with my boss, who showed her that he's got money. The only guilt I have right now is what I did to Evelyn. I know I used her to my advantage. I wish there was an easier way out. I wanted to get my own back. It was satisfying to see Joyce all alone, as she couldn't even confide in her mother after what she did to her. I thought about quitting my job, but then decided against it, as I wasn't the one at fault. I don't know where to go from here. Joyce left home that day and hasn't contacted me since. Evelyn was too ashamed to stay, so she left immediately after the incident. I'm writing this post just to distract myself from how sad I feel. I'm really hoping you guys can help me out with some advice on what I should do next. Thanks for listening. Hello Reddit community. Today I'm going to share my experience of losing the best thing that ever happened to me, just because of my greed and desire to get something better than what I already had. Hopefully my experience will help everyone to realize the importance of valuing the relationships they have and not seeking something else. I'm a 26-year-old woman who was married to my ex. My husband is 28 and we've been married for 2 years. We got married straight after college. My ex-husband joined a corporate job with a high package, while I became a housewife. My husband and I met at university. We were in different courses, but we had a lot of the same friends. We got closer and started dating. It wasn't serious at first. We were just seeing where things went. But as we spent more time together, we fell in love and got married. Our marriage was going well. My ex had to work long hours because of his job. He wanted to make a name for himself. I told him I'd support him in his dream in any way I could. We were young and everything felt doable at the start of the marriage. I thought it wasn't a big deal if my husband had to work late. I tried to be an understanding wife, but I failed. I used to scroll through Instagram, while people my age were partying with their partners or going on trips. I was in the kitchen waiting for my husband to get back. It started to get to me. I told my ex. My husband and I discussed taking a break and going on vacation, but he told me that he would do so at a later date. At the time, he had a lot of responsibilities and promised me that he would do everything he could to become financially secure. We had a good home and were still paying off debt, but we were not wealthy. We were not at the level of wealth that my ex-husband had achieved. My husband wanted to get to that level. He told me in college that he wanted to become a really big man. I thought that since I loved him, it would be easy to support him and be there with him while he worked a life he really wanted. I was going to enjoy the benefits of a luxury life as well with him. As it turned out, it wasn't really that easy. We were recent college graduates at that point in time, and everyone was enjoying life and showing it off on social media. I would get jealous of them enjoying their life, but then try to let that feeling go. This started affecting our married life as well. My husband would come home late from work, and I would tell him what I'd seen on social media about our friends. Either he'd ignore what I said, or he'd make some vague comment like, "Oh, okay." I'd get irritated by his reaction and start fighting with him. He was already tired, and when I started fighting with him, he'd get really mad. We'd stop talking to each other for many days, and then start talking again when our anger was gone. I felt like he wasn't seeing the sacrifices I was making for him. I wanted him to value it and appreciate me. I told him the same thing when we were having an argument. He got really upset and told me that he did see my efforts, but I was forgetting that whatever he was doing was for our future only. I didn't like the way we fought, but there was no other option left for me. I was frustrated. I felt trapped inside our house, and in that marriage, my ex and I started getting distant with each other. Looking back, I think the distance was caused partially because of me, but at the time I thought it was his fault. I was upset at him for not removing the gap between us. Our fight didn't decrease. I kept telling him how he'd changed after we got married. Every time I said that, he'd get really angry and storm out of the house, slamming the doors behind him. We started speaking less and less to each other. Every time we did speak, it was always something related to the house or something that had to be done. I felt even more frustrated as I felt that I was making all these great efforts for my husband's success, and we aren't even happy with each other. Even after all this time, we didn't even talk to each other properly. I was upset that he didn't try to talk to me. One day, he started talking to me over dinner. He told me that there was some work event and he would like to be there with him. It was sort of an office party. He smiled at me, and I smiled back at him. We were finally going to a party, even though it was work-related, and I was really excited. On the day of the party, I went to get my nails and hair done. It was long overdue anyway, and it seemed like a good day to go for it. I got ready and left for the party with my husband. It was a nice party. The venue was great, and the decorations were on point. It was at the rooftop of some 5-star hotel, and it had a great view of the city. We stayed at the Star Hotel, which had a great view of the city. It was my first time there and I loved it. My husband introduced me to everyone at the party. They were all his colleagues, who were around my husband's age. Everyone was polite. I finally met my husband's boss at the party. My husband introduced us, and I just kept staring at him. He was a very attractive man, slightly older than my husband, but really good on the eyes. He smiled at me and then asked my husband how he was doing. I couldn't believe he was complimenting me on my looks when he knew I had a gorgeous wife at home. My husband just smiled and told him I was a very understanding wife. I felt a bit guilty, but I hadn't been understanding at all. I vowed to do better from that day onwards. We met more people and had drinks with his colleagues. Everything was going great. There was only one thing I caught his boss staring at. I caught my husband looking at me more than once. I ignored the feeling in my stomach and tried to enjoy the party. It was great. We came back around midnight and were both so tired that we immediately fell asleep. The next day, my husband got busy with his work again. I had decided to be more understanding, but it wasn't coming to me. I just felt irritated and upset, but I didn't argue with him again. Days passed like this. I wasn't really happy, but I made sure that we were civil to each other. It was one afternoon that my husband called for dinner and told me that his boss was coming home for dinner that evening. I asked him why he hadn't told me he was going to invite him that day. He told me it was a Friday night and they were casually talking, and his boss mentioned my husband said that his boss was coming home for dinner that evening. He said that his boss had mentioned something about having homemade food in the city, so he invited him. I agreed with him and asked him what I should cook. He said that he would be home early to help me out and that he can pick whatever I need from the grocery store. After the call ended, I started cleaning up the house and preparing for dinner. My husband came in when I was in the kitchen and helped me out. He told me I could get ready while he was here. I nodded. I wasn't going to meet his boss in sweatpants. I couldn't decide what to wear for some reason. I wanted his boss to find me pretty. It didn't make sense, but I wanted that. I got ready and even did some makeup. When I went down, the boss had already arrived. He was sitting in the living room with a flower bouquet in his hands. He saw me and got up and gave me the bouquet. I was really impressed by him. He was really attractive and charming too. I smiled at him and he smiled back, which seemed a bit flirtatious, but then I thought I was making things up. We had dinner together. He kept telling me that he really liked the food. My husband was happy with that. Then his boss told me that I had to give him my recipe for the apple pie because it was really delicious. I told him, sure, and then we exchanged numbers so that I could share the recipe with him. The evening went smoothly, and he left soon after. My husband thanked me for arranging everything so quickly, and I told him it was no problem. We then cleaned up and went to bed. My husband had to leave for work early the next morning, so I slept immediately. I was awake and scrolling through social media. When I got a text from his boss, it was just a simple thank you for the delicious dinner, but it made my heart beat a little faster. I replied to him that it was my pleasure, and that was the end of the conversation, as I looked to the side and saw my sleeping husband. I felt a little guilty for crushing on his boss, but I couldn't help it. It wasn't like anything was going to happen between us, it was just a silly crush. I told myself as I went to sleep. A few days later, I got a text from my husband's boss. He said he loved pie and needed the recipe. I shared it with him, but our conversation didn't end there. He kept making small talk, and I engaged in that conversation with him. At that point, it didn't seem like I was doing something wrong. I just felt like I was having a friendly conversation with him. My husband's boss and I were exchanging texts all the time. He was really witty and charming. It was nice to talk to someone like this, especially since I didn't talk to my husband like this anymore. It was a bittersweet feeling, but we kept talking. My husband was so busy with work that he didn't even notice that my attention was completely somewhere else. For the first time, I wasn't bothered by his lack of attention to me. I kept texting his boss. Usually, when my husband was in the office, I found it weird that my husband couldn't make time for me, but his boss could. I thought that maybe I wasn't just a priority to my husband. Days passed like this. One day, I went to the mall to go shopping. I asked my husband for money before he left for his office. He gave me just after spending a few $100s. He said we should save money since we have to pay off the mortgage and other bills. It was really frustrating when I asked him for something and he told me we should save and list our expenses. I didn't say anything and went to the mall. I ran into my husband's boss there. I didn't tell him I was going to be there, so it was a surprise. He asked me what I was getting, so I just shrugged and told him that I was window shopping. He said that he was bored too and just came here to pass the time. He asked me if I wanted to hang out together, so I nodded and we went to random stores, just laughing and enjoying each other's company. My eyes fell on a limited edition LV bag. It was way off my budget, so I just looked at it with desire and longing. But then I put it back. My boss had noticed it and told me to get the bag. I laughed and told him that I couldn't. He told me to get the bag and that he would take care of it. I couldn't accept such an expensive bag from him, so I told him the same thing. He then started talking to the salesperson and bought the bag. I just kept staring at him in shock as he gave his card and bought the bag, which was worth $3,000. I was really surprised and impressed that he was doing that for me. Spending such a big amount wasn't a big thing for me, whereas my husband was more cautious when he had to spend a few $100. Then he gave me the bag and told me it was a thank you from his side for dinner the other day. I was still in shock about everything. I came from a middle-class family and I wasn't used to this type of lavish spending. My family was always very careful with money and only spent when it was absolutely necessary. My crush on him had intensified that day. I still remember the moment I walked into the house with that bag. My husband noticed the huge bag in my hand and asked me what I got. I showed him the bag, but instead of being happy for me, he started asking all these questions about how much money I spent on it. I got irritated and decided it was better not to tell him the truth. I told him it wasn't expensive and that I'd thrifted it from a thrift store. He was confused, but eventually believed me. He said it made sense and asked where I'd get the money to buy the bag directly from the store. I nodded and took my bag to my closet, where I kept it. I didn't mention the bag to him again. He got back to work, and I started texting his boss. I told him it was really thoughtful of him to give me the bag. We used to text each other all day. At that point, it seemed like he knew me better than my husband does. That was because he gave me his full attention, unlike my husband, who doesn't have much time or money. I felt bad for thinking that. The boss was really interested in my hobbies and how I spent my time at home. He listened to everything I told him. My husband called me on a Monday to say that his boss had asked him to go out to town for a work meeting that night. He came home, packed his bag and left for the airport. I was alone that night and was in my bed texting his boss about my day. We'd become friends at this point. He was 30, single and lived alone in his fancy apartment. He was funny, charming and really attractive. He asked me if I wanted to have dinner with him the next day, as I was alone. I didn't need much convincing and agreed instantly. I couldn't wait to see where he would take me for dinner. My husband and I only had ate at home and rarely took takeouts because that was more cost-effective than going out to a restaurant. I never got the chance to dress up, but I felt that I was finally getting my chance to enjoy everything when my husband called me the next day to ask how things were at home. I told him everything was fine. I was a bit confused as to whether I should tell him that I was going for dinner with his boss or not. In the end, I decided it would be better not to share that with him. I had asked too many questions and I wasn't ready for those questions at that point in time. I got ready just in time as the doorbell rang and the boss was standing on the door waiting for me. We got to his car and made our way to the restaurant. He took me for dinner at a very high-class restaurant. I had expected that we were taken to a secluded booth which gave us privacy. I didn't know how to feel about the situation. I was sitting in a top-rated restaurant in the city with my husband's boss. I decided not to overthink and just go with the flow. He ordered me wine, and after a few drinks, we started flirting with each other more directly than we did on texts. It was refreshing to experience this with him. My husband used to flirt with me before we got married, but then responsibilities took over and the romance took a back seat. I was on the front seat again and I loved every second of it. I was tipsy and I don't know what came over me as I went to his side of the booth and then kissed him on the cheeks. We suddenly kissed each other with lots of passion and it seemed so good. I had never in my dreams thought about kissing someone in such a fancy place. After some time, as I realized what I was doing, I pulled back from him. It hit me what I had done. I started to feel guilty for going behind my husband's back like this. My boss started to comfort me, telling me it was okay and I hadn't done anything wrong. The way he comforted me made me more emotional, so I hugged him again. He then took me to his house. He knew that I was attracted to him and I knew he was attracted to me as well. That night, I slept with him. I had thought to not think about the consequences and enjoy this small good. While I was at my boss's house, my husband called. He told me he was going to the airport and would be home by the evening. I told him I couldn't wait for him to come back to me. I then regretted telling him that. We didn't like each other anymore. Even if he didn't know that something was wrong before, he would know now. I called Paul Med and then started to get ready to leave. I went back to my place. I didn't think I'd be seeing the boss again. I'd only thought it was a one-off. I smiled at him to make things less awkward and then left. But then he stopped me before I could go. He asked when we'd meet again. I wasn't sure what he meant. He said he wanted to see more. He said one night wasn't enough. I was happy that he wanted me like that, but I was also confused as to how I could do this behind my husband's back without him finding out. I voiced my concern to him and he told me that I need not worry about anything. He will make sure that my husband doesn't get to know. I believed him because I also wanted to meet him again. I knew I was doing the wrong thing, but I couldn't control myself. I wanted this man a lot. He said he'd make plans for us and let me know via text. He kissed me again and then I left for home. My husband came back in the evening, just as I was done cooking his favorite, pasta. He seemed happy. He told me that his work has gone really well and he can soon expect a promotion. I was happy for him, but I was also thinking, will he still treat me like his boss does even after getting the promotion? I was really confused about what I was doing. Was I making a mistake? Was I missing out on something by having fun and enjoying the luxuries that I was not going to get with my husband? I didn't let my doubts change my decision. I deserved to have fun, so I started seeing my husband's boss behind his back. He would text me the location, and I would meet him there while my husband was at work. His boss made sure that my husband was stacked with work so we could get enough time together. I felt a little bad that he was so busy at work because of my selfish desires, but then the boss told me that my husband liked to work. He was enjoying it, and I knew that was true because he liked spending more time at work than with me. I let the guilt go and enjoyed the moments the boss always had some or other expensive gift for me. It was like he knew what was going to make me happy. Sometimes he would get me makeup and skincare from celebrity brands. Sometimes he would just randomly take me. He'd take me to stores like Dior and let me pick whatever I wanted. I loved the attention. I couldn't remember the last time I was so happy. I made sure that I had all the gifts in the closet so that my husband would never find out about them. I had no explanation if he ever came to find out about that. The boss took care of all my needs and everything I wanted. He made sure I got it. I made sure that we were happy in the bedroom. My husband and I had stopped getting away before I started my affair, so when I started my affair, I didn't doubt anything. I finally thought that this could be my life. I had stopped fighting with my husband because there was no need anymore. I was getting what I wanted from Beau, and everything was finally okay in our life. I didn't get affected when my husband put all his attention on his work. He didn't get angry at me anymore because I had stopped complaining. It was the life I had wanted, but it all got ruined until I had to face reality and come to terms with what one day, while I was in the kitchen in the morning, my husband asked if I had seen his blue tie. I had kept it somewhere in the closet, but I didn't exactly remember where. I told him to look for it in the closet itself. I went back to making breakfast when I heard him coming downstairs with a luxury brand bag. He asked me what this scarf was doing in my closet. I was completely shocked at his question. I had totally forgotten that I had hidden my gifts in the closet when I asked. I started thinking of a lie on the spot and eventually told him that it belonged to a friend of mine. She just told me to keep it here since it's very expensive. She was moving houses and didn't want it to get damaged or lost. He believed me, and then I took the bag from him and told him that I'd keep it back and get his tie on the way back as well. I immediately went and checked if he'd seen any other bags, but fortunately for me it was only this bag. I forgot to hide the gifts again. One day, my boss and I were going to a very exclusive VIP event he had been invited to. I was going there as his plus one. I told my husband that I was going to meet my friend and help her pack as she is moving to a new house. I told him that it would get late, so I'll spend the night there and then come back home the next day. He told me it was fine to take care of it. I got dressed in a gorgeous Chanel dress. I couldn't believe my luck. A few months ago, I was window shopping at the mall because I couldn't afford anything. Now I'm getting dressed in Dior and Chanel. The evening was beautiful. There were many photographers. It was a gallery opening of a celebrity artist, and various celebrities were in attendance. There were various photographers, too. I didn't pay attention to anything, I just enjoyed the evening. I wasn't used to being in places with such high. I then went to the boss's house and spent the night there. I got back home the next day around noon, thinking that my husband would be in the office. I didn't expect to find my husband sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. I asked him why he didn't go to the office as I made my way to the kitchen to make some coffee. I heard him tell me he was waiting for me. I thought it was weird, but I let it go. He then asked me how my night was. I told him it was nice. I lied about how I helped my friend pack up everything. By the time my story was over, my husband had come to the kitchen. He looked angry, but I couldn't understand why. I asked him what was wrong. And then he showed me the newspaper, where there was a picture of me in his boss's arms. It was from the gallery. The picture was really small, but it was clear that it was me and him. I looked to my husband to tell him something about how it wasn't true, but the anger in his eyes shut me up. He then went and brought all the bags that I had hidden in the closet. I even forget. All those bills were signed to his boss. I was in a really bad situation. My husband got even angrier after that. He told me I didn't think I'd go so low for fame and money. He then asked me if I was sleeping with his boss. I had tears in my eyes. There was no point in denying it, so I just nodded and kept crying. He looked. He seemed hurt at first, but then told me to leave his house. He said he never wants to see me again. I tried to go closer to him to hug him and apologize, but he stepped back and crossed his arms. He left the house and told me that he wanted me gone by the time he got back. I called the boss in tears. I was going to ask him if I could stay over at his place. I'd planned to stay at his place for a few days, but a woman picked up his phone. I asked her who she was and she told me that she was his fiancée. I was pretty shocked because he'd told me that he was single and lived alone in the city. The woman on the line must have known who I was because she started calling me names for sleeping with her fiancé. I couldn't believe what she was telling me. After getting I ended the call in a rage. I was at a loss as to what to do. I had lost my husband in my house and had no place to go. My boss had also lied to me. I had no idea he had a fiancée. I wasn't going to become homeless. I sat in my living room and thought that I was going to convince my husband to forgive me. I had believed that once he got to know the circumstances, he would forgive me. I thought that if I could just convince him to forgive me, we could start a new phase of life together. I waited anxiously for him to come back home. He came back after 3 to 4 hours with bloody knuckles. I asked him what had happened, but he didn't reply. He looked at me with murder in his eyes and asked me why I was still there. I went to get the first aid box and came back. I went to give him the first aid box, but when I touched his shoulder, he pushed me away and started telling me how everything was up for me. He said he'd gone to see his boss and punched him. He also told me he had a fiancée and laughed when he saw my face. He said sarcastically, "The play got played, huh?" He told me his fiancée was living in Canada and they were doing long distance. He then told me the truth. His fiancée had seen the picture and come to talk to him. She was going to take him back, and there was nothing I could do. I asked him why he couldn't take me back. He laughed and said that he wasn't as stupid as she was. His boss's fiancée had talked to him. He even managed to convince her to forgive his fiancée. He knew that if she forgave him, he would end everything with me. He said that he wasn't stupid and that he would end things with me and keep the option open that I could go with his boss. He then scanned all the bags and looked me in the eye. He told me that I had cheated on him for all this. He then laughed as my phone rang. My boss was calling me. My husband told me to pick it up. My boss said that his fiancée had returned all the gifts, so I should send them back to their home. I was shocked but didn't know what else to do. My husband kept smirking at me. I went to my closet and picked out all the gifts that he had given me. My husband was waiting in the living room when I came back. He told me that I've already called the lawyer and the divorce proceedings will start soon. I asked him to give me another chance, but he didn't listen. He said I was the worst person on the planet and to leave the house immediately. I packed a bag and left. I went to a friend's place. She let me stay for a few nights, but then her husband came back from she said it was best that I leave her house. Even my closest friend didn't trust me to be around her husband anymore. I then left the house and went to my parents' place. They weren't talking to me because my husband had told them the truth, but they let me stay there for a short while. My husband's lawyers contacted me soon and told me about the divorce proceedings. I started looking for a job, but it was tough to find one since I had no experience. I got married right after college. I felt like I'd hit rock bottom just because of greed and desire. I lost one of the most important relationships of my life. The divorce process started and went pretty quickly. I thought it would drag on for a year. I was hoping that maybe within this year I could seek forgiveness from my husband, but it was a long shot. The process only took 3 months, and even then, my husband barely contacted me. His lawyers handled everything, while mine represented my side. The court didn't grant me any substantial alimony. All the facts were in. My husband and his lawyers were on top of things. My lawyers couldn't do much. I'd already lost everything, my husband, my marriage, and even the chance to be with my affair partner. Thanks to my husband, it was all my fault. I can't blame him for what happened to me, though. He was just reacting to my actions. It's been a year since. In my last post, I saw all your comments. I know it was my mistake. I was young and thought I was missing out on my life by being with my husband. I thought his hard work and struggle didn't matter. I realize now how stupid that was. I've taken a job as a nanny, which doesn't pay well, but it's something. I've moved to a studio apartment in a less than ideal location in the city. I feel like I've lost hope of anything good happening to me now. I ended up sleeping with my husband's boss just to get expensive gifts. Everyone who knows what happened looks at me with disgust. I just keep my head down, feeling ashamed and guilty for what I did. My husband, on the other hand, is doing really well. He got a promotion at work and now wears expensive suits. He's on the ladder of success, while I'm on the road to hell. I've heard from someone that he's also started dating someone really hot. I feel happy for him, even though I'm sad for myself. I could have been that woman beside him, enjoying the luxuries. If I had been patient and stuck with him through his struggles, he would have had all the luxuries. He deserves all the success that is coming his way. In fact, I deserve all the hurt and shame I feel every day. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm literally sobbing as I write this, isolated after doing something wrong. Something wrong can lead to depression. My family doesn't want to see me anymore because I had an affair with my sister's boyfriend. I know that sounds very bad, and to be honest, I feel like I'm at fault. I also feel like a fool who couldn't control her feelings for a guy she liked, but there's always 2 sides to a story. I really hope I can tell my side of the story on Reddit. Despite several attempts, my family would rather isolate me than actually give me a listening ear. My sister won't even talk to me. I know she's mad, but I think I deserve a listening ear. The worst part is that she was ready to hear from her boyfriend and listen to his explanation. Why am I the one who has to bear the brunt of this? I'm Felicia, I'm 23 and I'm a college student. I come from a family of 6, with 2 brothers and a sister. My brothers are now living independently, and I live with my parents along with my sister, Gloria. She's 1 year older than me and also a college student. My sister and I have always had a good relationship, even though we do argue like sisters do. We've always been open with each other, but when we were younger, we used to talk about everything and had no secrets. However, my sister got into college first, and I was still in my final year of high school. I'm not sure how to explain that. We suddenly felt a lot more distant from each other. We were no longer as close as we used to be. She found it difficult to tell me things she would normally have no problem sharing with me. As time went on, there was a strain in our relationship. She felt like we were no longer kids and that she was now a college student, so she couldn't be seen with me all the time. That really hurt me because my sister has always been like my best friend. I never understood why college had to be the reason we were no longer close, but I let it go and decided to give her some space. 1 year later, I got into college too. I really expected my sister and I to get back to being close, but that it wasn't like before. There was still a bit of a distance between us. I'm not saying my sister was unkind or ignored me. We were still on speaking terms, and we never really checked up on each other. This was a big problem for me because I was new in college and always looked forward to having my sister show me around. Over time, I decided to stop relying on her for guidance. I stopped trying to get Gloria to hang out with me and started making my own friends. This helped me find my confidence in college. It was a good arrangement for me because I no longer felt like I was inserting myself into my sister's life. I didn't really know much about her personal life. I didn't know much about her directly. I heard most of it from other people. I found out that she started dating and went to parties quite often. I was really happy for her, but it was sad that we couldn't have sister talks about boys anymore. In the past, Gloria and I would sit on our beds and talk about our future boyfriends and what they might be like. We'd even made a promise to tell each other when we finally got someone we liked, so I was a bit disappointed that she didn't keep her promise. My friends noticed how I felt and told me it was normal for sisters to grow apart. They said I didn't need to overeat and I should just let it go. I think it's always easier. It's not easy, but you get over it. That's what happened to me in my second year of college. I started dating. This wasn't my first time, as I'd already had 1 or 2 boyfriends in high school. It was just my first time actually dating legally and without a need to hide him from anybody. My parents were pretty strict about dating, so I made a promise to myself that I'd only date when I was in college and old enough. My first boyfriend in college was a bit of a loser. I regret dating him, even to this day. He wanted to force me into getting intimate. My parents even noticed that he was a bad influence and talked me out of dating him. I actually liked him, but I didn't like his behavior, so I still felt bad about it even after we stopped dating because I liked him. I'm sure you can relate, fellow Redditors. I think it's fair to say that some girls just have the worst taste in men. I'm actually one of those girls, and I've promised myself that I'll work on it. It's almost like I keep attracting only the bad men after my first failed college relationship. I honestly expected my sister to check up on me. We live in the same house, our college is just a 1-hour bus drive away. It's a 1-hour bus ride from our house, so our parents told us not to stay on campus. Even my brothers called to check up on me after my parents told them about the pervert. My brothers literally live in another city, so when my own sister and my closest sibling, who lived in the same house with me, didn't even try to ask me how I was feeling, I was really upset. I know some of you would like to tell me how hard it is to just move on and forget about your sister. It's not easy to get used to being ignored by someone you've shared your whole life with. I'm a very confrontational person, so after my sister ignored me, I decided to let her know how angry I was. I walked up to her one day and asked her why she did not even care to check up on me. I was in college at the time, and she'd just finished a class. We were standing outside her class, and her F was waiting for her inside. I didn't know how she'd react when I confronted her, but I definitely didn't expect her to shrug and tell me to grow up. Does growing up mean I have to be distant from my sister? What does that even mean? On that day, she told me that I was being childish. I listened to her and decided to grow up. I was so angry that I promised myself never to talk to her about anything. I even took down our pictures from the wall of my room. I know I was childish, but I accept that. Even my friends told me I overreacted, but I did not care. Everyone deals with things their own way. I decided to handle things my own way, which was just my way of telling my sister to off. I'm sure some of you are wondering if I went and dated my sister's boyfriend just to spite her after what she said. Well, that's not what happened. I'm not a psycho, and I will never date her boyfriend just to spite her. If I were in that situation, I wouldn't be writing this Reddit post because I'd be blaming myself for what happened. I'm not saying I don't blame myself now, but the situation is a little different from what you all think. Everything started from a particular party that my sister's friend threw at her house. One thing about college is that parties are constant, and if you have crazy friends, who are the die-hard party animals, the likelihood of you ending up at a party is pretty high. My friends live for partying, which is surprising because they actually have very good grades and are very intelligent. I'm not saying I hate parties, I just hate attending parties that I wasn't invited to. My friends are invited to almost all the college parties. They also invite me by extension, which I think is a bit of a misnomer. I never really understood the concept, but I always gave in eventually. This particular party was actually thrown by my sister's very close friend, which I only found out when I attended the party. I knew I had to leave the moment I found out who was throwing the party. I didn't want my sister to think I only came because she was there. If you're wondering why I thought like that, my sister has said similar things before. Sometimes she even accuses me of trying to be in the same friend group, as I mostly ignored her claims because I'm not really trying to be the most social sister. I'm not trying to become a popular college student. I'm just an extrovert that likes good parties. I never really saw why my sister felt like I was constantly trying to be in a competition with her. I'd like to set the record straight. My sister makes these claims all the time. I've always loved spending time with her and talking to her. We grew up together and were pretty close. I'll get attached and find it weird to see us keeping a distance. We had 2 brothers who were already in college while we were just starting high school. There's quite a big age gap between us, and boys have their own ways of bonding with their sisters. Our brothers are as boyish as they come. They hate high school movies and feminine interests in that kind of environment. Gloria and we had a lot in common, so it was natural for us to bond. I was surprised, then, when my sister felt like I wanted to compete with her just because I wanted to spend time with her. Even after the grown-up comment she made, she'll make a fuss when we meet up at the same spot with our friends. I was really eager to leave the party as soon as I realized that my sister's friend was the one who organized it. I tried to leave, but my friends encouraged me to stay. They told me I was just overreacting and that it was just a party. If 3 of your friends are trying to convince you to do something in a party room filled with people and loud music, it's hard to resist temptation. I gave in and decided to just stay and have fun, even though I'd decided to stay. I tried my best to make sure I didn't encounter my sister. It wasn't like I was trying to ignore her because I was scared, I just did. I didn't want her to have more reasons to back up her claims while at the party. I met a group of guys that I found to be really cool. They were sitting at the edge of the party and they seemed to be playing games on their phone. I love video games a lot and I love playing them all the time. I learned how to play. I was really interested to see a group of guys playing video games because my brothers are also addicted to them. I was at a party and trying to avoid my sister. If I saw a bunch of guys playing video games, I'd like to play too. I saw that as a perfect way to escape clashing with Gloria at the party. I did not know those guys, so I did not walk up to them immediately. I found one of my friends and asked her if she knew who they were. She did not know them either, so we asked another friend. One of my friends said she knew them and had the same class with them. I asked her to introduce me. This was a great way to avoid any awkward encounters with Gloria at the party. I didn't know those guys, so I didn't approach them right away. I found one of my friends and asked her if she knew who they were. She didn't, so we asked another friend. One of my friends said she knew them and had the same class with them. I asked her if she could introduce me to them, and she agreed. I asked her if she could introduce me to them, and she said yes. I wasn't trying to get anything out of it. I just wanted to play video games. There were also some girls watching them while they played. I'm not the only one that got intrigued by the guys playing video games. I'm the only one who was foolish enough to ask my friend to introduce me to them. I never would have imagined that my sister had a crush on one of those guys. I never even met them before or knew we attended the same college. Only one of my friends knew who they were. This just goes to show how little I knew about the situation. My friend took me there and introduced me to them. They seemed to know her, just like she said, and they were friendly. I asked if I could play with them, and they didn't mind, so I joined in after they finished the game. I didn't know how to play the game they were playing, so they showed me the rules. After a few minutes, I got the hang of it. My fellow Redditors, I was just a girl playing a video game. I didn't even remember their names. I just played with them while we chatted about random stuff. That was literally all I did until the party ended and I left with my friends. I forgot all about that encounter the next day and moved on with my life. I didn't even remember what happened at the party. I wasn't drunk, I just had 2 drinks while we played video games. When I say I don't remember, I mean it was just a normal night. That night, I just saw it as another party and didn't think much of it. But then, many weeks later, I was walking casually in the hallway at my college when someone called out to me. When I turned back, I saw one of the guys I'd met at the party while playing video games. I didn't even know his name. He had to remind me what his name was. He asked me how I was doing, and that's how we started talking. It was just a random conversation that ended barely 5 minutes after it started. I told my colleagues about it, and they told me it was just a normal conversation and I should stop overthinking it. I know I should, but I just can't help myself. I tend to overthink things. I like to read into situations too much. To give you an example, I did find Brandon attractive. I just hope no one I know ever comes across this post. I can only hope that they don't. I found Brandon attractive and that was one of the reasons I kept overthinking. After he had a quick chat with me in the hallway, we didn't see each other for over 2 months. I even forgot all about him and our conversation, but I bumped into him at a bar one day. Just to let you know, I'm old enough to drink in a bar, but I wasn't really there for that. Although my friends didn't work at the bar and she asked me to accompany her so she could see him, Brandon was there with his friends and they were occupied with drinking and chatting. I saw him first but I pretended not to have seen him. I simply waited for my friend to conclude her conversation with her brother so we could leave. I decided to wait for her outside since she told me they were going to take a while. It seemed like they were arguing about something, so I didn't want to intrude. I sat on a chair outside the bar and scrolled through my phone. I heard some movement behind me and when I turned around, Brandon was standing there. I was really surprised to see him there. I thought he didn't notice me in the bar and was chatting with his friends. He asked me what I was doing outside on my own. I told him I was waiting for a friend. I was surprised when Brandon asked me why I didn't. He said to say hi to him in the bar, where he'd seen me too and felt like I was ignoring him. I found that a bit weird, so I told him I had no reason to ignore him. We had a bit of an argument about it, but that's how a conversation started up between us. I was just having a normal conversation with him. He seemed like a stranger because I didn't know much about him before my friend finally came outside. Brandon asked me for my phone number, which I gave to him. He gave me his own phone number. I was excited to get to know him better. I liked that he loved video games and was quite good at playing them. I felt like I could connect with him on a deeper level. Brandon and I started chatting a lot and we even met up at bars to play video games. 2 months after exchanging contacts with him, we became really good friends. We didn't have any classes together and he was a year older than me in college, but we still found time to meet up and play video games at some point during our friendship. I felt the need to speak to someone about him. Brandon is a really attractive guy and I had feelings for him. We were friends who met up whenever we could, but I still had strong feelings for him. I wanted to speak to someone about it so I could understand what I should do. I was afraid he just saw me as a friend and nothing more. I also wanted to know if I should make the first move and ask him out. I was very hesitant in making my decisions because I I was still heartbroken from my first college relationship, so I didn't want to rush into anything and risk getting my heart crushed again. I was so desperate that I even went as far as asking people online for advice. I went on social media platforms anonymously so I could figure out the next step I was meant to take. My social media quests led me to seek advice from someone who suggested I just go for it and stop being hesitant. Before I go on, I'd like to say that social media can contribute to one's curiosity. Sometimes I went to speak to absolute strangers and felt comfortable asking them for relationship advice. I had no choice because I literally had no one else to turn to. I didn't want to ask anyone else because I didn't want my friends to know I liked Brandon. They're careless talkers and could have ended up revealing everything during a meeting with him. I couldn't speak to my sister either because we weren't as close as we used to be. It had been over 2 years since we last spoke. I had to confide in my online friends, who advised me to go for it and tell Brandon how I felt. I've never felt so shy and nervous to do something like that. Brandon had a lot of charisma and you could tell how confident he was in himself. I was literally scared to tell him how I felt because I was afraid of making a fool of myself. One day, I finally decided to come clean and tell Brandon how I felt. We hadn't seen each other for over 4 months, and we'd only communicated on our phones. He asked me to meet him at our usual spot, which was the bar my friend's brother worked at. When I got to the bar that day, I was in for a surprise. Imagine a girl who has a crush on a guy walking into the bar till I saw him waiting patiently for me. I was feeling excited, but it ended up being for nothing at all before I could even get settled. Brandon asked me for relationship advice. I was so shocked that I could not even say anything for a very long time. I did not like the fact that he was asking me for relationship advice. He did not know I had feelings for him because I'd never told him before. But still, could he not tell? Brandon couldn't tell I had feelings for him, which was why he could ask me for relationship advice. I already knew it was impossible to date him if he had a girlfriend, so I decided to let my feelings go and do the most reasonable thing I could think of. I asked him what issues were going on in his relationship and he told me his girlfriend was mad at him because he didn't give her a gift for their 6-month anniversary. To be honest, I felt like that was the lamest reason for anyone to be mad at their partner. I even wanted to stand up and leave the bar right there and then. I thought he had serious issues he was dealing with. I didn't realize it was just some stupid argument. I controlled myself and just told him that the best thing he could do was get her a gift, then apologize. I left the bar after giving him the advice he asked for. He was surprised that I did not stay. I suggested we play video games together, but I made up an excuse. I don't know if guys just do it intentionally or if they're really as clueless as they claim to be. How can you not tell if a lady likes you at that point? We'd been friends for almost 8 months, and we'd played video games together and chatted for almost all day on our phones. How could he have been spending so much time with me when he had a girlfriend? I was really angry, so I decided to stop contacting him. It was a reflex action, and I mostly did it for my own good. I didn't want to keep spending time with a guy who had a girlfriend and was also my crush. It wasn't healthy, so I stopped replying to his texts. 2 months went by and I'd forgotten about Brandon. Our college exams were coming up, so I used the opportunity to focus on them. After the exams, we were on break, so I spent my free time with my friends. I got permission from my parents and was allowed to go spend the break. I spent the break at a friend's house, where we mostly partied. We went to clubs, bars, and even parties we weren't invited to. It was a way of letting off steam after our exams. I never expected to see Brandon again until one day when I saw him at a party my friend and I attended. I was surprised to see him, but I was not surprised enough to go speak to him. I tried my best to avoid him, but he spotted me with a friend of his towards the end of the party. I was chatting to a random guy when Brandon suddenly appeared and gave him a big hug. I realized that they were just friends who had been brought together by chance. I wanted to excuse myself, but Brandon stopped me. He told his friend to give us a minute, and his friend agreed. I don't mean to change the subject, but why do guys do that sometimes? You're talking to a girl and your friend just comes out of nowhere and tells you to excuse him. The surprising thing is that most guys don't mind and they will go along with it. I wasn't ready to stand up. I was there and wanted to have a conversation with Brandon, so I asked him to excuse me so I could go to the party with my friends. Brandon playfully grabbed my hand and asked me why I was ignoring his messages. I told him I was busy with exams, but he refused to listen to me. He accused me of ghosting him for no reason at all, even though I was actually busy reading for the exams just like everyone else. He asked me why I did not contact him after the exam, even after all my attempts to make up excuses. But Brandon did not listen to me. He asked me to follow him outside so we could talk without the music disturbing us. I listened to him and followed him outside. My fellow Redditor Brandon had the nerve to ask me if I ignored him because he had a girlfriend. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing I had a crush on him, so I denied his claims, even when I met Brandon at the club back then. I still had feelings for him. It's something I cannot deny. My feelings didn't just disappear after ignoring him for months. I asked him how his girlfriend was. I asked him if he was still with his girlfriend, and he said he wasn't. I wasn't sure if I believed him, so I asked him again. He said he was serious and that he was single. He told me that his girlfriend was overprotective, which is why they broke up. I have to admit, I was happy to hear that. If you have a crush on someone and they tell you they're single, you'll probably see that as a sign that a relationship might happen. I took his word for it and I trusted him and didn't doubt his words. There was no reason for him to lie. He hadn't lied to me months back when he asked for relationship advice, so I didn't think he'd lie to me at the party. I believed him but pretended I didn't care that he was single. I asked him how long he'd been single. He said up to a month. When I went back home that day, I was excited. I liked the idea of Brandon being single again. It meant I could finally make a move and see if Brandon texted me that night, and we started chatting again. I started getting his texts as often as I used to, and our friendship was back on. We even played video games at the bar like we used to before I was still at my friend's house, so I had the freedom to go out whenever I wanted. It was also a nice experience because Brandon and I were on break and had the opportunity to meet up freely without school getting in the way. I honestly believe that Brandon liked I noticed the way he started flirting with me. It was a gradual process and he started very discreetly, but as time went on I noticed it. I didn't have a problem with him flirting with me and I even flirted back because I liked him. The first time we shared a kiss was when we were playing a video game together. It just happened in the spur of the moment. I didn't expect us to start kissing in that fast, but we did not stop. We started greeting each other with kisses anytime we met up to do. We even spent minutes making out instead of playing video games. I was spending the break with my friend who lived on her own, so one day when she went out, I invited Brandon to her apartment. We spent the whole day talking, playing video games and making out. Things escalated really fast and we ended up sleeping together that day. After he left, I spent hours thinking about what we had done. It was not my first time and I was not a virgin, but it had been a while since I had been intimate with anyone. I was really affected by it and felt that sleeping with him was a positive step. I was quite emotional and acted like a teenage girl who's just fallen for someone. I realized that my limited relationship experience made me overreact to what others might see as normal. Brandon came over to my friend's place a lot after that and we had sex a lot. It was like I was in a full relationship with him, but we hadn't put a title on it yet. I hadn't put a title on it yet. Well, that's what I thought was going on. I never in a million years would have imagined that the guy I'd been sleeping with and dreaming of was my sister's boyfriend. I mean, Brandon didn't even tell me he had a girlfriend. He told me he was single. I was surprised to hear that Brandon was no longer in a relationship and was single. I was even more shocked to discover that I was having an affair with someone else's boyfriend, my sister's boyfriend. One day, I decided to ask Brandon if he was ready to go. I was tired of hooking up and making out with him when we didn't even have a formal relationship. I thought he was my boyfriend because we were doing everything couples do together. I also thought he felt the same way and would ask me out at his own time. Eventually, I got tired of waiting, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and do the talking. We had already resumed college by then, but I was still at my friend's place. To be honest, I did not want to go because I knew I could not invite a guy to the house as frequently as when I was bringing Brandon to my friend's house. I couldn't invite a guy to my house as often as I could when I was taking Brandon to my friend's house. My fellow Redditors, I invited Brandon over to my friend's place one day and asked him why he was taking time to make things official. I asked him if we were a thing or if I was just his fling. Brandon decided to play the stupid card. He sat down on the bed and told me to take a seat. I thought he was about to say something serious, but he told me he was back with his girlfriend. He said the guy I'd been doing everything with for weeks looked me in the eye and told me I was so angry that I almost scratched his face with my nails. What do you mean by that? I thought you told me you were single. I remember asking him in those exact words. Brandon looked me square in the eye and told me that was then and that he was already back with his girlfriend. You needed to see the way I just stood there. I was like a fool, to be honest. I actually believe that I am a fool. I was so angry that I threw the pillow at him. That's my version of violence. I asked him why he slept with me the day before if he had a girlfriend. He just told me I was his fling. Brandon told me that I was his fling, but I don't think so. I followed him outside and tried to get him to explain himself, but he left without looking back. I felt like the world's biggest fool. I was so heartbroken that I decided to call my friends and finally tell them about the experience I had with Brandon. We met up at a cafe and I told them everything. I was in a state of distress. My Reddit friends were upset that I hadn't told them what was going on sooner, but they still offered their support and tried to make me feel better. Just 3 hours after we separated, one of my friends called me with some surprising news. She decided to ask around and find out who Brandon was dating. I was dating someone and found out that his girlfriend was Gloria. I was shocked, disgusted and scared. I couldn't even pull myself together. I found out that I had been hooking up with my sister's boyfriend. I swear that I had no idea that Brandon was dating her. My friends, they encouraged me to go and tell her the truth, since it was better for her to find out from me and not someone else. I agreed with their suggestion and went back home. I called my sister to my room and told her everything. My fellow Redditors, my sister slapped me hard on the face and called me redacted, and redacted. I was so shocked to hear those words. My own sister said some pretty harsh words to me. I tried to make her listen to me, but she just ran off and told our parents I had an affair with her boyfriend. I was just a spider to her. My parents didn't even give me a chance to explain. They believed everything she said and told me I was letting bad friends influence me into dating my own sister's boyfriend. My parents stopped speaking to me. They never even acknowledged my greetings. Whenever I tried to explain, they turned a deaf ear and shut me up. Gloria never misses a chance to swear at me and call me names. She even called my brothers and told them her own version of the story. I've been trying to make my brothers understand what really happened, but even it seems that everyone believes Gloria's version of events, which makes sense given that I'd been angry with her for keeping her distance from me and college Brandon. As it happens, Gloria is still dating him. She forgave him and is still dating him, even though I've tried to show her the lies he told her. Our previous text messages to our parents and Gloria don't believe it. In fact, Gloria even says I edited the messages just to frame him. I'm currently isolated in my house and I had to go back to my friend's place because I was tired of the side comments. No one is ready to listen to me. My brothers send me money for tuition and upkeep, but they don't even want to pick my calls. I can honestly say that I had no idea he was dating my sister. I wasn't living at the house when I was seeing him, so I had no idea. He just told me he had a girlfriend and I stopped replying to his texts immediately. When we met again and he said he was single, I never knew I don't think he was aware I was Gloria's sister. He still went ahead with it. I feel like this every day, but I promise I didn't have an affair with Brandon intentionally while I was aware he dated my sister. I stopped telling each other everything, so I had no idea she had a boyfriend whose name was Brandon. Brandon never came to the house before they started dating. My friends have tried to convince my family, but no one is listening now. I regret keeping everything from my friends, and I regret hooking up with a guy who didn't make his intentions known just because I liked him a lot. Brandon is a liar and a cheat, but I'm the one paying for his mistakes. I blame myself for being so careless and stupid. I don't know if my family will finally listen to me one day, but I'm trying to focus on college. Maybe one day the truth will come out. I'm tired of trying.